I started in the mailroom, broke with $100,000 in student loans, making $300 a week. From mailroom to wherever I was 10 years from starting the mailroom, I was a multimillionaire. I'll just leave it at that. It was actually less than 10 years.
If Charles King's life were a movie script, no studio would buy it. A young black man packs up his belongings in a U-Haul, moves to Los Angeles sight unseen with nothing more than a list of names and the drive to become a major player in the entertainment industry. That kid eventually lands in the mailroom at WME, one of the most prestigious talent agencies in the industry, and goes on to become the first black partner at a major talent agency. From broke to a millionaire in less than 10 years.
I had to borrow my wife's jacket.
But his journey doesn't stop there. Not even close. The three numbers to look out for in this story: 300, the amount Charles made each week in the mailroom at WME; 150 million, Macro's outside investment for film production; and 6, the number of Oscar nominations Macro received for Judas and the Black Messiah. Here's how Charles King went from the mailroom to the head of his own major Hollywood empire called Macro. For CNBC Make It, I'm Nate Skid. This is Founder Effect. Charles D. King grew up in the idyllic suburbs in the outskirts of Atlanta, and he was always on a hustle. Whether selling supplies at school, cutting grass, or working as both a counselor and a janitor at the local YMCA, Charles was always good with money. But watching his dad start and build his own medical practice left an indelible mark on him.
And seeing him leave a job, start his own practice. My mother was like the first receptionist. He was, it was just amazing watching it. But the other thing was the freedom that he had.
After his parents' divorced when he was in the 8th grade, he became acutely aware of the financial and personal difficulties caused by their split. He was hell-bent on avoiding the same fate and worked hard to earn a scholarship to Vanderbilt. How did you come across the entertainment industry as a possibility for you?
Somewhere around between my sophomore and junior year in college, I've always had this ability to identify talent in other people. I started doing commercials and print work and things like that. And I got an agency in Atlanta, and I did the same thing in Nashville while I was in school at Vanderbilt. But what I really started doing was helping friends get into it. Someone I was working on one of those projects said, "Hey, Charles, you're at Vanderbilt, you're studying political science. Have you ever thought about a career in entertainment law?"
The idea had been planted in his mind. After 2 years in the corporate world, Charles went back to school with a singular focus.
Then I went on to Howard Law with an area of interest and focus around entertainment.
But it was the time he spent outside of class that made the biggest impact on him. It was the summer of '95. MTV was one of the most influential networks on television, and hip-hop was exploding. Charles had heard about a powerful attorney at MTV named Candace Heidelberg Yap, and he wanted to get a meeting with her, so he wrote her what he calls a Unabomber letter and befriended her assistant, Patty.
My crazy Unabomber letter somehow actually had made it to Tanya Heidelberg's desk, and I think she thought, like, who is this guy? And that informational meeting turned into, have you ever thought about interning at a place like MTV? And it was that summer, that was the year that Biggie Smalls' album went platinum, and that was Bad Boy, and it was like the growth of hip hop. And it was really, for me, it became the opening aperture for me to really understand the larger opportunity in our business.
All the while, Charles continued to manage a cadre of musicians and entertainers, which caught the attention of one of the lawyers at MTV, who gave him a critical suggestion.
So I was doing good work there, but I was managing music groups and running around doing all these other things. And I think that what the attorney saw was that I was someone who, she said, "Look, Charles, I think you would make a really good lawyer. But I got to tell you, I've been watching you. I'm seeing how you interface. I'm looking at how you're connecting the dots. I think you would make a great agent." And frankly, it was that insight that had me go research the talent agency space.
The soundtrack from 1996, the year Charles graduated from Howard, featured artists like the Notorious B.I.G., Lauryn Hill, Nas, Outkast, Dr. Dre, and Tupac.
What was clear was that hip hop culture was driving pop culture, and that pop culture is what's driving everything around culture on a global level. And so what I could see was that what was happening, what we were seeing in music, we're beginning to see in fashion that was going to ultimately happen in film and television. So that when I moved to Los Angeles and landed in the mailroom, and I was kind of talking with the people who were running William Morris and the chairman and the vice chairman, the presidents, everyone I was getting to know, I was throwing stats, I was throwing data and articles in front of them. One about the impact of hip hop culture on the entire landscape, but also the growth of demographics.
So in 1997, 7 months after graduating Howard, Charles packed up his belongings in a U-Haul and headed to Los Angeles. He was given a list of potential names and companies.
I came out, I didn't have a job yet. I didn't have a computer. I didn't even have a car. I really traveled out and stepped out on faith when I moved to LA. I had a vision, and I had a list of names, and I knew a few people, but that was part of my journey. And I said, I'm going to start at the oldest one in the business, the William Morris Mailroom. And so I landed in that mailroom in May of 97.
So I just want to make sure that I understand something correctly. When you say the mailroom.
Yes, the mailroom, where you're literally sliding mail, kind of like this, but you imagine mailboxes on the wall. Here, that person put their thing in the box, and then you deliver the mail, but you're also running around like a gopher, getting coffee for people, taking packages from one floor to the other, one building to the next, go around the corner. You're literally running around on your feet about 60 to 80 hours a week.
But he saw it as a perfect place to get to know the agents, or more importantly, their assistants who hold the keys to their schedules. In his mind, he was basically getting paid to network while learning to decode industry jargon.
So even though it was a mailroom, I knew enough and had done enough research to know what an incredible opportunity it was. So that's the reason why they pay you $300 a week, because what you're going to get out of it is exponentially greater.
It took Charles almost a year to finally make it out of the mailroom, where he made just $300 a week.
I cultivated relationships with people in every sector. So by the time I finally landed on a desk, particularly after I floated for months before landing on a desk, some of my closest relationships to this day are senior agents and executives that were in all of these areas that were outside of the space that I even worked in.
But Charles wasn't your average assistant.
As I started getting referred potential client businesses to bring in artists to have them be represented by William Morris, even while I was still just a trainee and in the mailroom, those relationships ended up being key to helping me, as I was beginning to move up the chain of command and go from assistant to agent. And yes, Missy Elliott was one of those first people, but there were many others. And this was literally, I was still on a desk then.
Charles tapped a deep vein. By the time he was promoted to a film agent in the year 2000, he was a 7-figure player and being groomed for a leadership position at WME. His client list kept growing with top-tier talent. He signed DMX when he was pulling in $10 million per film.
One of the first people that I started representing, somewhere into my first 6 months of being an agent, there was a show called the movie The Kings of Comedy film. And there was a gentleman named Walter Latham who was the promoter and the financier of that. And he was an African-American man at the time. He was 31 years old. He put up half of the money alongside MTV, and they financed that film, and it made a fortune. He said, look, obviously Cedric the Entertainer, Steve Harvey, Bernie Mac, they're all great. But have you heard of this gentleman named Tyler Perry? And the thing about Tyler, he had a vision. It was clear he owned his own library, but he wanted to bring his brand into film and TV. And so in terms of how big, there's not one deal I could say. There was a series of transformative deals, mega 8-figure deals, but then the television 1090 deals that we did, those were all 9-figure deals. And we did three of those. By 2005, I was already at more than a 7-figure business, and I was being groomed for long-term future leadership of the firm.
How many Black partners were there at the time?
There were none. I was the first Black partner at WME and in the history of Hollywood.
Why? Okay, you have this amazing job. You've got you're like super agent. You have the dream client list. I'm guessing you're making a ton of money. Why leave?
Well, as I mentioned to you earlier, there was always much I really enjoyed being, and I was very good at being an agent. However, there was the long-term vision to do what I'm doing now. Even before I came out, I had a 10-year plan to launch and build my own diversified entertainment and media company.
All of those big wins and deep connections meant next to nothing when he went out on his own, especially when seeking outside investment to launch Macro.
Yeah, 95% of them were not in entertainment and media.
Why not?
You just look at the shifts that are happening in our industry. I think that there's been just business has been done a certain way within a certain group of people for years. They want to continue. They've wanted that to stay that way, but it's going to change. It's changing now. The shifts are happening, period. And it really is going to be those that get on board with it are going to be the ones that are going to last, that will be around in the future. And then those that don't are going to be like the dinosaurs that die off.
But the industry was taking notice of the moves Charles was making. In 2015, he left WME and used his savings to self-fund Macro's launch before getting a financial lifeline.
Our first round was an undisclosed 8-figure sum. And then I can tell you that we announced another round of financing for our production capabilities, which was announced as $150 million to both finance movies that was equity and a credit facility.
He used that money to finance the productions of films like Fences, Mudbound, and Judas and the Black Messiah. In 2019, Macro's investment arm called Mac Ventures raised $110 million, and Macro grew by 82% during the pandemic. It just seems like you're seeing the opportunities before other people. You're laying the groundwork before that opportunity even presents itself, because you have this idea that everything that you're doing is laying groundwork for the next thing, If you're in the mailroom, it's about building relationships, and it's about seeing that. If you, are exposed to MTV, it's like learning about the music industry. If you're in college with your friends, it just seems like you always put yourself in advantageous situations, but it's not luck at all. It's strategy and hard work, for sure.
Well, you work really hard. I've been tirelessly working. You have a vision to take a chance of a lifetime with my entire family, to leave my former job and to have people then believe in us to support this vision.
Macro's film Judas and the Black Messiah received 6 Oscar nominations. It was the first time a movie with an all-black production team received such acclaim.
And to then have an opportunity to tell a story like that one was financially lucrative to all of our investors and stakeholders, for have a movie that's going to literally be there for the test of time, that will always be there to represent this incredible story. I was overwhelmed with joy and felt very gratified and validated as to the need for what Macro is doing and our mission, both business-wise, creatively. And so I could say I was quite excited and fulfilled, and it makes me feel like the hard work and sacrifice was worth it.